So were you in Boston yesterday?
I didn't go in during the day yesterday. I mean, I watched it on television, but, it's so far, I've been at some of these things where the first responders were together, and they are really an extraordinary group of people, the firemen, the policemen, the EMTs, and so articulate talking about, what it meant to them that day and how it still, is in their heart to remember not just the bad things that happened that day, but watching the progress of the survivors in the course of this year. So I just hope to God when the actual marathon takes place that it'll be a nice sunny day and everything will go well, because that's the best way to really break the spirit of what people tried to do on that marathon a year ago, to just show that people aren't afraid and they're coming out in even larger numbers.
It's always not amazing to me, but and this sounds arrogant, and I'm not, but it restores my faith in humanity to see people like here in New York on 9/11, the way ordinary people behave, the bravery, the courage, particularly the police and the fire people who are courageous beyond my ability to comprehend, and particularly true of people in Boston. That night they all sang the Star Spangled Banner at that hockey game. I saw that the other night on ESPN. It's unbelievable.
And it was clearly spontaneous.
Yeah.
It shows. I think it's a really important thing to remember, because it shows that there is this inner desire in us, I think, to be part of something larger than ourselves, to belong to a community, and to give, of ourselves to that community. Obviously soldiers and firemen and policemen do it as part of what they do, but ordinary people get a feeling of enlargement when they're part of something, and when that's what, certain decades are like that. We've had times in our history, the decade I just wrote about, the progressive movement, the reason I wanted to catapult myself back into that time was that it was a time when people in churches, in settlement houses, in academic life, in politics, were all trying to soften the industrial era and do what they could to protect women against exploitation. They felt great being part of that decade. And on these moments like on or 9/11, that comes out in all of us. So we know it's in us. It just needs to be brought out. And sadly, it comes out too often in a moment like this, like crisis, but you would just hope that it could be somehow brought out more often, because people do feel better when they are part of that group.
The role that sports plays in every aspect of our lives and the conduct of it is remarkable, isn't it?
It is definitely something that connects us to our cities, to our communities, to people across racial lines, across class lines.
To each other.
To each other. There's no question. Last year, when I think about, the Red Sox, and especially watching this year, such a different performance level from last year, I have no doubt that something last year, to go from worst to first, had to do with the fact that they felt connected to the city from day one. These high-flying players nowadays, they say, even honestly and confessedly, we can't let ourselves get emotionally attached to the cities in the same way they used to maybe 50 years ago, because we might get free agent. We might go somewhere else, of their own volition. They move much more often than they did when I was a kid. But something happened with the marathon last year and that famous baseball game that's always played that morning, and then the Boston Strong stuff and David Ortiz, that team really was closer to the city, I think, than at any other time. They went to the hospital, they visited the survivors, and that helped them, and they won, and that helped the city, and the whole city came together with them. I went down to the ceremony at the White House when they were given their praise by the president, and of course David Ortiz came right out on the platform, and he was the symbol again. But it is the magic thing that sports has, because it's much more than following a team and its physical process. It's following one another and having something to talk about that people can share, going way over everything else that we can share.
It's soon, obviously, to assess the tenure of President Obama, but I can't imagine that either you or people like you are going to be writing a favorable treatise on his term in office.
I honestly do think it is too soon. It takes almost a generation before you can look back at the context and the times in which somebody led. That's why I'm so glad I don't have to do it. 30 years from now, there'll be somebody like me, there'll be some, or even younger, much younger than me, historian, that will look back on what did he face when he came in. Certainly the fact that he was the first African American will be forever remembered in history, the campaign and the excitement it generated. We'll see 30 years from now how the health care thing rolls itself out. We'll be able to see, how the Dodd-Frank thing worked or didn't work, and we'll be able to see he rolled down Afghanistan and the war in Iraq. But to put it in context in what might have been and what was, that takes time. Look, Truman left office at such a low level of popular approval in the 20s, and it took time for people to realize all the things he had done, aid to Greece and Turkey, desegregating the army, really dealing with the Cold War, the atomic bomb, and lots of just integrity of the man that we saw after the fact. So I will wait for a young Doris Kearns Goodwin to come along in 50 years. The problem for that person will be, unlike me looking back at the Civil War now, or looking back at the Progressive era, I have diaries and letters, the treasures. Those are the golden things that an historian has to get to the intimate side of the people we're writing about. So somebody 50 years from now will have much more stuff about us. They'll see him walking and talking.
Sure.
They'll have thousands of pictures, but they won't have, that pleasure of looking over the shoulder and watching what they're writing their life at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect of all that, and allowed you, of course, like I love No Ordinary Time, just for your ability to draw those kinds of images from that kind of observation. So anyway, it's always nice to talk with you.
That's the fun part of history, to really catapult your back in time and think you're living beside these people. I actually do half the time. They're in my room. I think I know them.
All right, thank you, Doris. Doris Kearns Goodwin here in the Imus Morning program, 10 till the hour.